Fred here. Welcome back to the Gun Geek channel. Just a little bit of a change. Today is going to be a rant. This was a spur of the moment kind of thing, so I'm using the webcam, so I apologize ahead of time for the poor resolution. So, I'm watching the Mexican president's speech, and I can't believe what I'm hearing. The Mexican president is going down the U.S.'s left-wing agenda. Now, I'm not going to get into the broad politics of this whole thing. My channel is about guns. So, over the last 2 years, I would, occasionally get a comment from a viewer that would say, they ain't going to take your guns. What are you worried about? Well, here is your sign. And here is some email. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put my tinfoil hat on. I bet you some of you have already guessed that I do have a tinfoil hat. And I want to see what it's telling me. Well, it says that Nancy Pelosi might have had something to do with that speech. And I think, or my tinfoil hat believes it's time to float the assault weapons ban balloon and see if it floats. Thank you, Mr. Tinfoil Hat. So, Mr. Calderon is being used, apparently, by our far-left folks to forward this specific agenda. I saw a lot of representatives stand up and give a standing ovation when Mr. Calderon suggested that we reinstate or bring back the assault weapons ban. I suggest to you to try to find some videos out there on the internet of his speech and try to see if your representative stood up and gave a standing ovation, especially if your representative said he supports your gun rights. Because he might be lying. Or he might be just saying what he needs to say to get your vote. Anyway, according to Mr. Calderon, 80% of the guns seized in Mexico have been traced to the U.S. So of the 100% of the guns that were seized in crimes in Mexico, he is saying that 80% have been traced to the U.S. Now, this 80% is very close to another number we heard a couple of months ago, 90%. You see, the Brady campaign and the head of Homeland Security, and some other folks were stating that 90% were being traced back to the U.S. But what they didn't tell you was that this was 90% of the guns that were successfully traced, not the whole 29,000 that were actually seized during crimes in Mexico. So let's get rid of the lies and talk about the truth. Now, the truth is, according to ATF documentation, which the newest comes from the year 2007 through 2008, 29,000 guns were used in crimes in Mexico. That'll be considered 100%. Get my hands straight here. Okay. Now, of those 29,000, 11,000 were submitted to the ATF for tracing. I can't get my hands right, but that's about a third. Now, of those 11,000 that were submitted, 6,000 were successfully traced. Hands are getting pretty close together. Of those 6,000 that were successfully traced, 90% were found to come from the U.S. Specifically, it was 5,114 guns. So that's where they got the 90%. Basically, 90% of the 6,000 that were successfully traced came from the U.S. But that number is 5,114 from the 29,000 that were used in crime. So the real percentage here is 17%. So very big difference. They're twisting numbers here. They just picked what they needed to pick to push their agenda. Anyway, where did these guns come from? Where did all these other guns come from is a better question. Well, they're coming from Russia, Guatemala, China, and believe it or not, their own soldiers. 150,000 Mexican soldiers deserted during that year. and they took their assault M16 rifles with them, probably to use in drug crimes. So there's your sign.